Hello and welcome to our guide for the Slayer character using Flicker Strike. The Flicker Strike is one of the fastest attack skills in the game. It teleports you to the nearest enemy to strike them with your weapon. It has a cooldown of 2 seconds, but it can be bypassed by spending Frenzy Charge. To fully enjoy this build, you will have to get a reliable Frenzy Charge generation. There are a few ways to do so, such as igniting an enemy with Oro's Sacrifice, landing a critical strike with Terminus Est, or investing into Mark and Sword Masteries to get Frenzy Charge on hit. The best and most reliable way is to use the Farrell's Fur Armor, or its replica version. Since you have to invest heavily into Frenzy Charges, the Slayer is the obvious choice for the Ascendancy due to its masterful form, which makes your Endurance Charge limit equal to your Frenzy. It is a great boost for your defense, but it also can be utilized offensively by equipping Arn's Anguish Belt. The general idea to scale your damage is simple. You will use a high DPS weapon and critical strikes. The Void Forge is one of the strongest melee weapons in the game, but at first you can also use cheaper options like Rakiata's Dance or a rare weapon. The only limitation here is solving the Frenzy Charge generation. Flicker Strike is a simple strike skill with the obvious benefit of teleporting you right to your target, so you will need sources of additional strike targets and splash effect. You can also use the transfigured Flicker Strike of Power, which has less attack speed but a higher critical strike chance. You will have a lot of damage reduction from the Endurance Charges, Fortify and Brutal Fervor, lots of armor and evasion rating, a high chance to suppress spell damage, and excellent life recovery. However, using the Flicker Strike is inherently more dangerous than any other skill in the game. The main reason to use this skill is the very fast and unique style of clearing maps. With enough investments, the damage is also great. However, lack of agency over your position makes it bad against uber bosses. Playing a true melee build on a low budget is possible, but it will be uncomfortable at times. We recommend getting at least 30 Divine Orbs before starting this build. There is a variety of unique items you can use. The final version uses Void Forge to scale the damage and replica Farrell's Fur to generate charges, but there are plenty of alternatives with much lower costs. At first you can use the Farrell's Fur to generate Frenzy Charges. The power charges are very easy to generate anyway, and it lacks other defensive modifiers, so you should aim to replace it soon. It's very similar to the original version, but instead of power charges, you gain Endurance Charges, which require much more investments to acquire otherwise. It also occasionally grants you the Onslaught buff. This belt converts your Endurance Charges into Brutal Charges, which grants you a 3% chance to deal triple damage each. Try to get a corrupted version that also offers elemental resistances. If you want to use the Arn's Anguish Belt, you will need those boots to retain the defensive bonus of your Endurance Charges. You still have to generate Frenzy and Brutal Charges in some way. When utilized correctly, it is one of the best weapons in the game. It adds 700% of your physical damage as a random element, which scales very well with sources of added damage. It is quite expensive, especially at the start of the league, but becomes more affordable over time. The Rakiata's Dance is the best two-handed weapon for its price. It is especially strong against highly resistant enemies, which are usually the most problematic to fight. You can get a corrupted version that grants you Fortification buff, which saves you a few passive points. Abyssus does make you vulnerable to physical damage, but it also provides you with an insane amount of critical strike multiplier and physical damage for attacks. It is a great choice if you don't mind occasional deaths. For the Elemental Sword version, you can use the replica Abyssus instead. You can easily apply all 3 elemental ailments, which will make your enemies take up to 30% increased damage. The Void Forge disables physical damage, so you can't benefit from poison or bleed for another 20% damage, but it is possible for other setups at a minimal investment of 2 passive points. On the Watcher's Eye, you can get a defensive bonus associated with Purity of Elements, or opt for the more offensive modifiers with the Precision Aura. With this jewel, you will easily gain 92% Chaos Resistance without any other investments. You can also opt for extra critical strike chance, but it is not that impactful. The Lethal Pride adds randomized bonuses to nearby notables. Try to get one with bonuses to your critical strike multiplier and intimidate enemies on hit. The double damage chance is not as effective since you are using Brutal Charges. At first you can use the transfigured flicker strike of power, which uses power charges to bypass cooldown. With this ring and the precise technique Keystone, you will generate charges on every hit. It is obviously weaker than the final version, but it will be enough to cruise through the early maps. It's a straightforward attack type build. You should get sufficient accuracy, crit multiplier, and damage for attacks. For the defense, you should aim for high maximum life and spell suppression, ideally on bases that grant high armor and evasion ratings. You will also need to cap your elemental resistances and attribute requirements. A rare helmet is a defensive-oriented option. It should get you maximum life, resistances, spell suppression, and other various mods such as accuracy rating or resistance. For Eldritch mods, get reduced mana cost of skills and mana reservation efficiency. If you don't plan on using the Arn's Anguish, you can use a pair of rare boots that provide tons of maximum life, spell suppression, elemental or chaos resistances, and various avoidances. You don't need movement speed, as you will mostly travel via Flicker Strike or Leap Slam. Look for maximum life, spell suppression, and attack speed, which you can obtain by using the Essence of Zeal on a fractured base. You can add the aspect of the cat using the Bestiary, and finish it with damage while leeching modifier via Crafting Bench. Use Exarch Influence to gain additional strike target. Amulets offer a huge variety of useful stats. Besides life and resistances, seek accuracy, intelligence, and some offensive mods, like added physical damage or critical strike multiplier. You should anoint the Frenetic notable for extra frenzy charge. On your rings, you should seek added physical or increased elemental damage, accuracy, critical strike multiplier, and maximum life. You will also need plenty of resistance or attributes. Try to lower the mana cost of your skills too. A regular belt with life, resistances, and increased elemental damage for attacks is good enough, but you should definitely swap it later for the brutal charge setup to boost your DPS significantly. Your jewels should provide extra life and various critical strike multiplier bonuses for swords or two-handed weapons. You can also cover lacking resistances or attributes and get immunity against corrupted blood. There are a lot of viable options to choose from, but the Feed the Fury notable is by far the most effective one. You will probably skip the third notable to save passive points. A good prismatic tincture can easily boost your damage by a great amount. You won't sustain it permanently, but it doesn't require charges, so you can use it multiple times in longer fights. The Bottled Faith greatly improves your critical strike chance and damage against enemies standing on the consecrated ground. Enchant it to be used upon striking an enemy, as it's the only source of consecrated ground in this build. For your remaining magic flasks, we recommend using a mix of offensive and defensive flasks that boost your critical strike chance, armor, and evasion. Thanks to the Slayer's recovery, Life Flask is not that important. Flicker Strike is an attack that automatically seeks nearby enemies and teleports the character to strike it. If you have a frenzy charge, it will be consumed to bypass the cooldown. At first, you can also use the Flicker Strike of Power, which is easier to sustain and has a higher critical strike chance but has slower attack speed. With the multi-strike, you will attack 3 times while spending only 1 charge, which greatly helps with hit-based charge generation. While using the Flesh and Stone, being in the Sand Stance significantly reduces the damage dealt by nearby enemies, but it loses value against ranged enemies. The Purity of Elements grants you additional elemental resistances and makes you immune to all elemental ailments. The Arctic Armor reduces the physical and fire damage you take while using a Flicker Strike, as you will always count as being stationary. Herald of Ice adds cold damage to your attacks and creates explosions when you kill the frozen enemy. You can also use the Herald of Purity for more damage. Precision adds accuracy and increases critical strike chance. Try to keep it at low level to reduce its reservation cost. Use the Enlighten support to greatly reduce the reservation cost of all your auras. You can also link the Precision aura with the Arrogance support to reserve a bit of your maximum life instead of mana if you desperately need it on a higher gem level. The Aspect of the Cat grants you a rotating buff that improves your attack speed or damage avoidance. You need it to generate charges with the Farrell's Fur, which also removes its reservation cost. You can socket the less duration support in the gear piece that grants you this skill to speed up charge generation. The Assassin's Mark increases your critical strike chance, critical strike multiplier, and grants life and mana on kill with a small chance for a power charge. You will automatically apply this mark when you hit an enemy. You might also need the life tap support if you don't have enough mana. Leap Slam is your main movement skill. It has no cooldown and you can use it to jump over the ledges and walls. Use the faster attacks to make your Leap Slam better. If you don't have mana cost reduction on your rings, you will need the life tap support to make it spammable. Immortal Call significantly reduces the damage you take during the effect. Match its level to the linked support, otherwise it won't trigger. Keep those gems at level 1 to activate them at the slightest sign of danger. You can also opt for the high-level Molten Shell setup instead. Blood Rage is a temporary buff that increases your attack speed, life leech, and has a chance for a frenzy charge on kill. You can place the War Banner on the ground, which massively boosts your physical damage. Its effectiveness depends on the valor that you gain by fighting enemies. Additional quality and longer duration is very beneficial for both of those skills, making them more reliable and useful. Killing all bandits for 1 additional passive point is the best option, but you can also help Alira to make your resistances easier to cap. The Major Soul of Arakali will greatly help with damage over time effects, which you can't negate with armor or suppression otherwise. With the Soul of Ralakesh, you won't need the bleeding removal on your flask, but you can also pick Soul of Ugul for a cheap elemental reflect immunity. Although Flicker Strike is available at level 10, you won't be able to sustain its Frenzy Charge's demands so early on. You should use some other melee attacks such as Cleave, Frost Blades, or Blade Storm instead. You can try switching to the Flicker Strike at level 51 by equipping the Terminus Est, but during leveling your critical strike will be quite low. You can also use the Transfigured Flicker Strike of Power, which deals less damage but requires power charges to bypass the cooldown instead, which are trivial to generate via the Ramira's Banquet Ring. For more leveling tips and adjusted passive tree progression, visit our written guide on the website. There are a few crucial notables and masteries on the final passive tree that you will always want to pick. You will need the Tribal Fury for the splash effect and additional strike target, Steadfast to be able to gain fortification on hit, Vitality Void to unlock the instant leech, Acuity for the accuracy rating, Elemental Mastery for inverted resistance, and any spell suppression mastery for the lucky chance. Other than that, there is a lot of flexibility in terms of increases to your damage, maximum life, and crit notables that you can pick. With the Slayer's Brutal Fervor, your leech won't stop preemptively, and you gain additional damage reduction, but you could also opt for more damage in the form of a powerful cull effect. That's all you need to know to begin your journey with this amazing skill. Thank you for watching, and we wish you a lot of success. Have a good day, and see you in the next video.